Welcome to the July 13th, 2023 meeting of the Decatur Architectural Review Board. I will call roll with each commission member answering present. Ella Chenault.
Present.
Lynn Schubert.
Present.
Bill Stone.
Present.
And I'm Jacob Woods, the board chair, and we have a quorum present. Dr. Swope is the city's preservation specialist. Thank you to everyone who is attending today. Your involvement in this commission's proceedings is vital to the effectiveness of this process. There is a copy of the agenda out front if you would like one. Historic district designation means your neighborhoods have been recognized by the United States government, the city of Alabama, and the state of Alabama and the city of Decatur as being architecturally and historically significant to our community. Historic districts are not created to prevent changes, but rather to ensure that the proposed changes are appropriate to the individual properties and the districts as a whole. The board's responsibility is to review the appropriateness of all proposed changes. Each historic resource within the districts is assessed on its own individual merits, which is appropriate for one property may not be appropriate for another based on resource age, location, neighboring properties, and stylistic details. The Architecture Review Board's rulings are based on written standards and regulations that guide our review and decision-making. These guidelines and the Commission's decisions have the force of city ordinance. You can access our guidelines along with application forms on the city's website. Our hearing process is as follows. Staff will present the applications. When they read your name and property address, please be prepared to come to the podium. Staff will present the application and staff assessment of each request. When staff is finished presenting the application item, the applicant and/or designated representative will then state their name and address and provide any additional information or comments regarding that application item. The board may ask clarifying questions of the applicant at this time. Next, we will hear any public comments on that particular application item only. After public comment has closed, the chair will entertain a motion and the board will discuss and dispense with that application item. Staff will then proceed to the next application item and so forth. An approved certificate of appropriateness, or COA, will be issued in the form of an email that CC's both the applicant and the building department approximately 1 week after this hearing. The document will outline and reaffirm what was approved and that the project has been approved. A COA must be issued before a building permit can be obtained. If any changes to your project are anticipated after the COA is issued, it is the responsibility of the homeowner to contact staff and she will help guide you. In some cases, you may be required to submit the changes for review and issuance of a new COA. If your project is denied and you are not issued a COA, you will be issued a letter stating the reason for denial and additional information. Denied COAs will be sent via certified mail to the property owner's address filed with the Morgan County Revenue Commissioner's office. You may resubmit an application with revised plans at a future meeting. There is an appeal process for denied COAs as well, which is spelled out in the municipal ordinance under section 1825 and 1892. After all applications are heard, the commission will entertain general comments from the public limited to 3 minutes per individual. First item of business is the approval of meetings from June 8th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
Have motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Item number 3, expedited COAs since the April meeting.
We had 849 Johnson, that was for a new roof. 618 Line, that was for repair in kind, the soffit area up under the roof. 630 Grant, that's repair in kind roof and siding damage for a alley garage. And 608 Ferry, new front porch railings.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All right. Item number 4, new COA reviews.
The first COA is 810 Jackson Street Northeast. This is for a pergola in the Albany district. So you'll see the boundary on the map. So it's kind of almost directly across from the Presbyterian Church on Jackson. The background, it's a turn-of-the-century cottage. It's a contributing building within the Albany district. Staff received notification about an unauthorized construction project on the site and a stop work order was placed. A large pergola had been constructed in the side yard. So for approval, they're requesting approval of the pergola. And here are some of the images of it. And their submitted plan shows fencing and landscaping screening on it as well. So under our current design review standards, Decatur's design review standards, number 11, landscaping, 7, garden structures. Garden structures such as gazebos, a pergola would be included in that, should be located as to not be readily visible from public vantages unless documentation is provided indicating that such elements are historic conditions of the property. Staff findings, as currently cited, the gazebo is highly visible, but if the submitted landscaping plan is followed, it appears that it would be closer to meeting those standards. And so staff just suggests that for clarity's sake, that the landscaping plan be part of the required project date and is completed in a timely manner, and is part of the entire process. Staff does not have additional detailing on the fence, and so typically at the half point, and that's about where that fence comes in, that is a fast-track COA process, and so that is something that I can work through with the applicant without the commission needing to focus on that this round.
All right, any comments from the commission?
You're the property owner. I didn't even catch her. I know she's, there you are. I'm gonna have you go up to the podium so that you're on the mic and they can hear if they might not have any questions, but if they do, that way everyone will be able to hear.
I presume the fence will be all the way around, the two sides, the one in the front and the side thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the landscaping will be as kind of you drawn it there.
Yes.
Any other comment?
I drove by there today and, you know, with that new plan with the arborvitae or that type plant, that would, I think, fit very well.
I like your front steps.
Thank you very much. That's from the last time I was
Yeah,
here.
That's right.
In the depot, which was much more cozy.
Yeah.
I also went by and looked at it, and I'm assuming, I have no issue with the pergola construction. I think installing the fence and the landscaping as you've got shown would definitely meet the requirement of making it less visible from the front vantage point. The fence would also, location of it, I'm okay with you fast tracking that
Okay.
as well. Based on what I can read from the fence, when I read that this is a visible secondary vantage point and a 6-foot fence is appropriate in that location.
Okay. Anything else?
Do I don't have anything else.
Okay.
Do we have a,
I guess the only thing would be timeline to get this completed. I
Right.
know the pergola's already complete, but do you have a timeline or when you think the fencing and planning?
I was waiting to see what tonight held before I decided, but that shouldn't be a problem. I have somebody in mind that's already agreed to do it.
You think a month, 2,
Yep, I think so.
a month?
do we want to give 6 just to hold for weather and planting, and that way
Yeah.
it gives a longer runway just to
6
be
months?
safe?
Weeks.
Weeks,
Yeah,
okay.
No, months. I was gonna say
Clarify.
months, because that puts us, yeah, I was gonna say
Talking
6,
months?
yeah,
What are you talking?
6 months, because that'll put us securely into the, winter if needed, if something comes up with material shortages or just trying to get someone in to do it.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
All right.
Do I
I
have
make a motion then that we approve the certificate of the COA with the idea that the fence, you'll meet with staff about the fence and get that fast tracked, and within 6 weeks,
6 months.
6 months,
Yeah, 6
Okay.
months.
6 months, that we'll have that up there.
It'll be 6 months.
It's drawn there.
I'm sorry, what was that last thing you said?
As you got it
Okay.
set there.
Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
All right, it passes, thank you, and I can get in touch with you and we'll figure out how to move through the next steps.
All right, thank you so much.
626 Grant Street, Pritzl. This is a large one, so it's gonna take me a little while to kind of go through all the various stages. It's cladding replacement, new porch supports, and new railings. This is the location on the north side of Grant. And it's the greenhouse that you see here on the left. It's a difficult house to get because it has really mature landscaping. This Free Classic Victorian is a contributing building in the Albany district. Staff issued a COA for repair in kind rotting boards in preparation for painting. By the end of May, the entire front porch railing had been removed, almost all the siding on the west side of the house. A new front railing taller than the historic one was added. Some porch supports were removed, fiberglass replacements were installed. Porch supports for the second floor balcony on the west side were also removed. A stop work order was issued. Staff met with the owner and reiterated that only the select rotting boards to be removed and that full siding removal, at that time it was disclosed that full siding removal was done because it accommodates adding a wrap under the new siding. Since the historic siding was no longer on site, staff reiterated to the homeowner the proper protocol for targeted siding replacement and told them they could go ahead and finish. They had already ordered custom milled siding to match to go ahead and finish that facade. A property owner confirmed that contractor had been reminded of proper protocol within the district, and then the property owner on his own accord reached back out to staff on June 22nd, notifying the city that the contractor had fully removed a large portion of the front facade, second floor siding. At this time, staff issued a full stop work order for the entire project until the board could review. So this is what was on the first site visit, and you can see where they've just started replacing with siding that's milled here. That just gives you a slightly better picture of the front. And this was that first site visit. If you look at this railing and you go to that railing, you'll see the difference in height. So historic railing, new railing, stair railings, and some of the replacement fiberglass columns. And this was after he reached back out to staff to say that the project had continued on removing siding on the front. So I'm going to break it into sections because there's multiple things, and we'll look for approval or votes on each one of them. On the siding, so historically what the commission has required on siding is when you have some of the siding has failed beyond, these are two projects that were permitted within the district, that it's selected to the damaged boards. So in some cases there are large pieces. I know with the house on the left, the gray house, they had a huge section that needed it because they had no gutters on the house, and that one section down low where the rain had hit needed some. The house shown on the right was more targeted based on where the cracks were. Exterior siding, 1.1, retain original materials. Original exterior siding, shingles, banding, and or corner boards should not be removed unless it is demonstrated that replacement is necessary. Repairs, 2, all repairs should match the original woodwork in material, color, texture, workmanship, and character. 4, replacement materials. When the replacement of exterior siding, shingles, banding, and or corner boards is necessary, the replacement should match the historic conditions in design, material, and workmanship. There is a rear addition on the house that does have different siding, and he had requested that since this siding is damaged, that when it is replaced, that it be matched to the rest of the siding on the front. The commission has historically allowed far more flexibility on rears that are not visible from the street. West elevation, second floor porch supports. So you'll see up there, the porch supports are missing. They've taken out so they can structurally, keep it up while they're getting new ones. This is what was there historically. These are turned Victorian. He does have replacements. They are wood. So this is what he is proposing putting back up. You will notice that they are, the dimensions on these, let's see if I can go back, are going to be taller because of code with porch railing heights are higher. So on the older ones, the turning will start close to 28 to 30 inches because that's where historically you would have your railing placed. And you'll see on the newer one, there's a lot more height here before it becomes turned. That's because when a new railing goes in on that second floor, it's gonna be taller. Front elevation porch columns. Oops, did I miss one? Oh, here we go. Under findings, Mr. Pitzel had ordered a new siding to match the exact siding that was on the house. Some of the porch columns on the residence at the time work started were fiberglass. So he had a mix of wood and fiberglass on his porch to begin with. The commission has approved synthetic columns to replace severely damaged wood columns in the past, most recently at 714 Line. Columns where just the bases were damaged have traditionally had new bases built and inserted. On the porch banisters and hand railings, the front porch railing was at the standard 28-inch height. That's what you find with the historic railings. The new railing is 34.5. The owner has stated that he wants taller railing because the historic railing does not meet code. I did talk to the head building inspector for code for the city to determine what was appropriate. He said because it was a historic building, he could put back the low 28-inch railing if he liked. If he wanted a taller railing, code actually is not what Mr. Pitzel built, which is 34.5. Code is 36. So the new railing that was built is too low to currently meet required code for new construction. And Mr. Pitzel's aware of that. I talked to him afterwards. So he is proposing adding additional strip. So you can see where it attached on at the original height here. This is the new height. As currently built, it would have to go up a little bit taller. Here you can kind of see it from another angle. So what we have there would not be the finished height. He is proposing building it up to look like this to give it that extra height. He is also proposing a horizontal strip to give it a divider, and this would be added after the construction. So the picture that I have here, this is what the commission worked through back when it was just the commission a couple years ago on the best way to handle porches that had 28-inch height railings, but people wanted them or they needed to be at code for one reason or another. The best standard practices within the field is you take that existing 28-inch high railing, which shows the appropriate height, and then you add a new piece on there, and if you notice it doesn't go all the way up, it's only every couple of balustrades that it goes, and that clearly distinguishes. There is another method that is used by municipalities. Some municipalities allow essentially a tension wire because they feel like that is not as visible, but that is a very modern appearance, and the commission at the time was not comfortable with adding that in the districts. They felt like out of the two options, this was the most appropriate one. And so this is what, staff has been authorized that I can allow this to existing historic railings if the homeowners feel they need to raise their railing with a staff approval versus coming in front of the commission. So I would suggest, for clarity on this, breaking these COAs down into each individual component. And we're going to start with the siding. So does the commission have any questions on that? And Mr. There he is. So we will have him come up front if you have questions for him.
Afternoon, I'm Wendell Pritzel at 626 Grant. This is actually going to be my third COA. The first one was for the rain gutters because I had water damage for lack of rain gutters, which is why the siding was so bad around the bottom of the house.
Caroline, have you seen the new siding? Does it match the,
Well, he's got,
well, I don't know what was originally there, so,
Oh, well, that would be this.
okay.
yeah.
This is a sample of it. It has, you can see galvanized corkscrew type nails, which I believe are probably a little bit more modern. But this was the siding that came off the house. I brought you a piece in case you need to see it.
Do you want to go ahead and pass that down?
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
Can you just send it down And we know it's gonna end with Bill, because he's gonna wanna look at it the
I'll pick it up
longest.
again, if
Yep.
you don't wanna keep it for a souvenir.
I might keep it. I have a whole library of building
I brought you
cards.
some nails. Oh, you wanna see this one too? Yes, ma'am.
That's what we're gonna be approving.
Thanks to Literal Lumber, we had, quite the time.
I guess if that's not a separate piece.
It's always fun at a lumber store.
Well, the guy that does the milling quit
Yeah.
the week before they were supposed to start our job.
Oh, sure.
It was delay on delay.
Pretty close.
So is all of the siding going to be replaced?
No, ma'am, that was never my desire. We've only been here almost a year, and we wanted to restore the house to the look and feel that it had originally. And there was just a lot of water damage from lack of years of rain gutter, proper care, proper caulking. But what we find is we pull one board out, the board on either side splits and cracks. And so that's why we've had such a time of getting it done. I had told my workers to not move to the front of the house. I took my dog for a walk and came back to what you saw. So that's why we called in and said, hey, we know this isn't right, what do we need to do? And here I am, so.
Looking at that shot right there, is that pretty much got the extent of what you're removing?
Yes,
Is
in
that the
fact,
stopping point?
if she were to go to the old picture, there was only one column that was actually making contact. 3 of those columns were not even supporting. And the railing was completely rotted and swinging at the bottom if you touched it, which is why we pulled that out, put the supports in, why I purchased new wooden columns to replace with the closest look as I could find for that purpose.
They're still looking at the wood.
Is this wood?
Do you need me to move?
Yes, sir, it is. That's poplar.
Okay.
Do you
It
need
better
me to
be.
move to a different side? Do you need me to go to a different side? Do you need me to change the image?
No, I don't
Okay.
think.
All right.
You may not be able to see that, but it's kind of a frown right there. That front outer band was deteriorated and termite eaten. And so we had to put a new outer band on there to support that properly. And the pitch was back towards the house. We've corrected that too to keep the water away. I'm planning to be here a while and try and do it right, so.
Guess I have a problem with the siding.
How much more do you anticipate coming off? I mean, how far, is it on the base all the way around?
It's on the, let me get my directions straight here. On the east side of the house, it's obviously not as bad because all the weather comes from the west. That is the west side that you're looking at there in the front of the house. On the second floor there, above that porch, there's probably another, I'm guessing maybe another 2 foot or so around the bottom that is rotted and needs to be replaced. On the east side, I don't think there's much to do. And on the back of the house, there's still some that has to come off and be the wood that she pointed out where it's a different type. We're trying to match all the way around the house so the siding looks the same. There is some hardy plank that was on there from previous owners. And so we're not gonna touch that because there's nothing wrong with it. But we're just trying to bring everything up to where it's gonna look and fit with the community.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the siding necessarily.
I mean, siding being milled like that, it's pretty close for what you could do. If we can try to not do a wholesale removal as much as possible.
That was never the intent. Believe me, my pocketbook is not bottomless, and I don't wanna spend any more on this than I have to, and I've already spent more than I wanted.
So they call them the money pits.
It's not funny.
Oh, I've got one too.
Do we need to vote on these individually in sections? Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that that's approved as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so siding. Porch columns. So he has a couple original, he had some that are already fiberglass, and he was replacing the ones that had reached the end of their life with more fiberglass.
Are you replacing all of the porch columns or
No, ma'am.
just? Okay.
The columns that need to be replaced have been replaced.
And from what I've seen, the new ones are similar
Yes.
design, Caroline, to the existing?
Yes,
Yes,
they're
ma'am.
similar. You can never get exact, but they're pretty
Right.
close, and he already had some that were fiberglass to begin with, so,
And we didn't notice when we bought the house, but after we looked at the porch, there's not, well, there may be two columns that are the same, but none of those rings line up at the top.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of piecemeal from previously. The one that was, that I said was piecemeal together, when we took it off, it fell apart in two pieces. And then the two columns on either side of the steps were completely rotted about that far down from the porch, from the water splashing up on it. So that's the reasoning why we went ahead and put fresh columns on. I didn't realize it was the issue that it's become, but here we are.
I don't have a problem with columns.
I think the fiberglass column replacement we have approved as a commission in the past. I know looking at the Lowe's, that finding that collar at the top is difficult to do unless it's custom made. I know they're close, but they're not exact. And I think with having one already there and as close as you can get, I'm okay with the column replacement as well.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the column replacement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
all right. Porch banisters and hand railings. Traditionally, the commission has been fine with adding railings for the stairs when railings are no longer extant. So in this case, it's just focusing on the appropriateness of the railing design and what he would like. Probably the best one overall.
If I could speak to that image particularly, Carolyn has spoken to me about the 28 inch and showed me the example of what they did previously. And quite honestly, I found that the one with the missing banisters, or I don't know if that's the right term or not, that it doesn't have, it's not a very pretty banister, let's put it that way. But I thought if I put this cross piece here at the 28 inch mark, visually that represents the original railing. And then raising the other part and painting that an appropriate color so it all blends in. That way, if there was, you know, for the flow of the community, you could see that where the 28 original was. But I brought it up to, well, we'll bring it up to 36 inches. I brought it to 34 and a half. Because we have grandkids, my 80 some odd year old neighbor, first time he came to visit, had to come up on all fours, and it just wasn't safe. And so we wanted to bring that up to code if it would be allowed for that very reason. It's just for a safety perspective.
So you've got to go back in and raise it another
I
inch
just,
and a
well,
half.
right now it's at 34 and a half, and if it's allowed, that's why I did the mock-up with the two boards on top. They're just sitting there, scrap pieces, but we would caulk and bring those down tight so you wouldn't see the cracks, because it wasn't a very pretty picture either. But just to kind of bring it up so to have a little bit thicker railing on top, be painted in a way that it would look appropriate to the house and to the community.
I see, I'm not wild about the thicker railing. I think that's going to call more attention to it and what more of the house.
Was all the railing structurally compromised?
The bottom railing all the way around was rotted out at the columns, and many of the I'll call them spindles because I don't have a better word for it, but the spindles, you could literally crush them at the bottom. They were rotted out, and that's the reason we took those out and replaced them. And somebody had went to town with a lot of caulk and wood putty over the past year, so it wasn't very sound. That's where some of the rot was on the column as well as where they were mounted to the wood columns.
Now, the bottom the little railing below that you're
Yes, ma'am.
doing there, is that just out in front of it? It's not part of, you
Oh,
know,
that's,
you've got,
that was just a mock-up. That would
Okay.
not, so we would put that's just literally.
that would
a
be built
thin piece.
into the spindles.
Well, we would put it along the front there, just like, so you could see it, but it would be, well, if you think about how the railing was, that's been proved previously with the 28 inch railing and then every like fifth spindle, and you have that top. If you think about it that way, that's I'm gonna call it 2x4 across, which sticks out either side of the spindle. So visually, this would be basically that piece of the 2x4 sticking out on this side of the spindle, because there would be no need to go through every spindle and put that in, because you're looking for a cosmetic effect, right? Decorative effect, so you can see where the 28 inch mark was, and then the actual handrail would be on top of that. Now, if we needed to do that, I guess we can you know, work with that and see. I thought it was more of a cosmetic effect to get the 28-inch visual line there for where the railing was, because it's not gonna be supportive, and put the handrail up on top. And I could be wrong in my thoughts, wouldn't be the
Well,
first time.
I don't know, I'm just thinking, just adding that in the front, you haven't, you know, the taller railings
Mhm.
are still there,
Yes, ma'am.
you know, so it's kind of like you've just stuck something in front of it.
Okay. So that's the railing that's been approved previously, where you have a bottom
Right.
rail, and then you tack something on top of it. And I'm proposing, since my railing's already solid and structurally sound, that I could put a decorative piece at that 28
But
inch.
you've got to raise that, don't you? Another inch and a half?
Not that part, but I do have to raise
The
the top. Yes, ma'am.
So you've got to go back in and do
You have
some
to
work
place
on
the
it.
piece on the top.
But if I put a piece on top to raise it to 36 inches, I don't have to move this railing that's there. I just need to paint it in that dark green on top. From the road, you don't even see. So from a code perspective, it's 36 inches. From the road, you're not gonna see that extra top piece.
I think the main purpose for that is to speak to what was there originally historically and separating it from what is new. So you kind of have the historic quality and the way it was constructed, and then you have what was added to it for whatever reason, whether it's for code. So it kind of lets you look at the structure and say, this element was original,
Mhm.
this element was added. And the way you got it now, that clear line between old and new is not there.
Mhm.
And so that's why we have approved that, the image you're seeing now in the past, because it gives you that line of separation.
How's our woodworking expert down there? Bill,
What?
what do you think?
Right.
Is the 36-inch height simply to meet code?
Yes, sir.
He would like it to meet code. The building department said it could stay at 28, but in this case, the property owner would like it to meet the code and go to 36.
He's about 34 inches above grade, so in the code it requires handrails at 36, or guardrails.
Well, for new construction, it would.
Yes, for new
Yes.
construction.
Right.
Now, there is historic
Yeah.
The old handrails was grandfathered
exceptions
in.
in there that.
Well, and rebuilding it to the original height would have been grandfathered in as well. So I met with the head of the building inspector to make sure that we had all the data on this ready. So. And we have had property owners before who have come in front of the commission who have wanted a railing, in some cases where one was not required by code because the porch was low, but they did want a railing. And the commission has been fine with that. The question has always been, what does it look like and how does it differentiate what the commission feels it needs to? So the height, the request for the height is not,
Okay, well, this is what it looks like. Okay.
And right now, the railing is 34 and a half.
Yes, sir. I did a Google search, but apparently I saw the part about the stairs and not about the porch, which has to be 36 to 38.
You know, I'm of the opinion that what he has done as it sits is fine, without any additional.
But he has to,
Because
he has
one
to
thing
raise
you
it.
said is an extra board on top is gonna beef that up enough that from the street, you'll be able to see that that top piece, instead of being probably an inch and a half, will now be 3 inches.
Yes, sir.
Of course, if you'd seen it was 36 to begin with, it'd all be done and it'd be neat and clean
We wouldn't
and
have
all
the
that.
conversation. Well, yeah, we would, because you'd still have to approve the 36.
Yeah, but still, yeah. But I would be fine with it, just to leave it the height that it is. I mean, if you're happy with that, because it's not under a code restriction because of historic value of the house.
I mean, I guess my only concern is that with, can you go back to what's there now? Yeah.
You know, with the addition of the 28-inch
Yes.
bar, I mean, that's, yeah.
idea, to my mind, what I'm saying, Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but is to not cover, the height was there, it's historic. And then the more you come up, the more of the house that you cover. And see, this is not, putting that little rail in the middle doesn't help with that. And if, of course, if it's gotta come up, then you're gonna have a large thing on the top. Which
To
just,
make sure I'm getting this in my notes correctly, so what I'm hearing
well,
is,
haven't made a motion.
well, I still put down discussion,
Okay.
so that's why I'm frantically writing chicken scratch. That you feel like the way that the commission has authorized before, which has the historic railing height, and when you go to the addition, it is more open, it is
Right.
clear, there's a distinguish between the two, so it's not the same design continuing up, it's much more open. And you also get a better visual line on that.
And to
You're
my
feeling
mind,
like that
adding-
is quite different than the
Adding
proposed
more on the
solution.
top.
And adding more on
Just
top will
make-
weight it down,
You've got a
okay.
thicker, solid thing at 36 inches. That's my concern with it. Now, so,
I would be comfortable with the 36-inch height, but with the more open at the top. It doesn't have to meet exactly what we've approved in the past. There could be some discussion on design for that, but the more open, you could get the separation between 28 and 36.
If we brought it up from the bottom, say, of the spindles, so instead of putting it on top, if we raised the spindles up and put that piece underneath where it wouldn't be visible from the street, to raise it up to the 36?
you're talking about the whole thing coming up?
No, ma'am, I'm talking at the bottom of the image. You see where the supports are right there in the middle?
Right,
So that's basically a 2x4 at the bottom of my spindles. If I were to pull those spindles off, raise it up an additional 1.5 inches to get it to 36, and then put the spindles on top of that, you wouldn't see the bottom board from the street because of all the landscaping as it is. It would raise that top railing up to the 36 inch, meeting my desire for a 36 inch safe rail for myself and my grandkids and visitors. And then, of course, putting the strip along for the 28 inch so that you could see where the historic side height would have been.
I want to make sure I've got this in my notes correct. So you're talking about taking the entire railing panel and just slowly shifting it up. There is a a maximum space that has to be under that. Would
Oh,
it
no,
still
ma'am.
meet that? Okay.
No, you're misunderstanding. I'm
Okay.
saying, so leave the bottom rail where it is,
Okay,
remove the spindle connection, raise those up, and put another board underneath those spindles, and put that on top of that bottom rail.
oh, so basically put another board right
Yes, ma'am.
here.
And
Okay.
raise everything up about 1.5 inches.
Okay.
So placing
Rather than put it on
your
top,
two by
Thick at the
underneath instead of on
I
top.
grew up on a farm, we figure these things out as you need to.
Bailey twine. Yeah, that's a good plan.
that still doesn't help me on the top.
Do what now?
It still doesn't help me on the top.
The top would be just like it is.
But
The
I know
original-
that, you've raised all the spindles up, and I think that was the design of this, is kind of see through it a little bit, and here's what it was, we're gonna make it safer, which you want it to be. But it's not just, this, to my mind, if you're gonna approve from there to the top at 36 inches, why are you adding the middle thing, because it's,
That's just to
Not
pay
helping.
homage to the original 28-inch
I don't
height.
have to put that on, right?
Yeah.
You're exactly right. That's what I was wanting to do, is try it, because when she told me it could disrupt the flow of the visual part of the neighborhood, I thought, well, how can we help with that? And that, when you think about the image that we saw for what's been approved, where you have this 2 rails, that essentially mimics that. It just, there's more spindles or balusters or whatever the proper term is for them.
And like you said, he doesn't have to put that on there.
No, her concern was more of a visual. When you're looking through something like this, or looking through something with just 2, you can see more past it. So it kind of goes away a little bit when there's fewer spindles. So when you're looking through it, you can see more of the house and less of the rail.
Yeah, I know what you're saying,
That's what,
but because of that design, to me, that takes away more than it would add. I mean, that's
yeah.
my opinion. I mean,
Ellis.
because that was nowhere close to original.
If you look at the
Ellis,
original.
I should clarify for the record, that is the approved one that the commission has standing is approved for replacements, and that is standard in most municipalities. But that occurred before you came on the commission, but I do want to make sure you're aware of that. There were two possibilities, and that is the one the commission felt was the most appropriate because they felt the metal tension wire one was too contemporary for what they wanted to see.
And if I may, the reason we built this the way we did, the original one had square spindles and had about a 5.5-inch board on top and about a 2x4 on the bottom. And so that's as close as we could get with the height difference. So other than that it's tall, that is the original railing design. Had the square spindles, had the board on top, board on bottom. And that's what I was trying to do, was to try and keep the look for the house.
Any more discussion? I have a motion.
Well, I make the motion that we allow him to proceed by raising it 1.5 inches, putting another board underneath. So the bottom gap would be the same as it is now, but it essentially would raise everything up to the 36. And I have no, I mean, I like the bar across it because it does pay homage to the original, but I'm not married to that. But I'd make the motion to do as you proposed, to add the spacer underneath instead of on top.
Okay.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Um,
No.
So motion fails to carry. That means this COA, the porch railing design as proposed, is not approved. So could the commission, how would the commission like to proceed so that he has something to come back with or something that staff could authorize for?
I think I'd like to leave it with staff, but I think my main concern, and I don't know what yours is the visual through the top of it. You know, I mean, to me, if you're gonna have it 36 inches high, all the spindles this way, and you're just putting a board across it, why bother with the board? I mean, I know,
I agree with
I
that.
recognize what you're saying, Ellis. But it's just kind of, you might as well let it go at 36 inches. And that's generally not what the commission has approved for the
Okay.
board or wherever we are now.
All right,
And it was before my time, but they have been through the proceedings looking at
Yep,
raising
before mine,
the
too.
rails to this, and this is what has been approved in the past. This is what we've approved as a remedy to raise the rails to a code compliant height.
With what you said with this design that's there now, if the top rail as built now was at 28 to go to 36, I would agree that that structure would allow more visual. We're talking about 1.5 inches. And 1.5 inch difference isn't going to allow a lot more visual. I mean, if it was going to be, what would that be, 6 inches?
Yeah.
It's gonna be
28.
6 inches.
Yeah, it's
From
six-
28
it's
to
28 to
36.
36. You'd have to put it back.
It's already at 34.5. It's only
That's
talking
new.
about another inch.
That's
That's
new.
No,
That's
already
unapproved.
constructed.
no,
That's
but
already
they're,
constructed.
no, they're saying that's not approved. That's the vote was that it, so it has, what they're saying is to take it down to 28 and then build back up on top. If I heard
Yeah.
correctly,
Because
that's what I've got in my
the
notes.
original rails was
Okay,
at 28.
so the original 28-inch height, so they're
This is-
essentially
this is-
saying,
What's on the house
Yeah,
right
okay.
now is new.
I understand that. But what I'm saying is to do from the original, if it was still on the house, the original is 28 inches, to go to 36, is it 36?
36.
36, yeah, that would be 8 inches. So you'd have an 8 inch to see through the top part. I would agree with that. but as it's constructed, it's 34 and a half.
I guess my point is,
So you're only
construction
going-
was done without approval.
Correct.
That's my
The
concern.
stuff that's built there is not correct.
Yeah.
It should have gone back to the
It should have-
28
it should have come here
height rather
first.
than
Yeah,
the 34 and a half. That's the way it should have been done to meet the existing characteristic of the house. And then raised it up from that point.
yeah.
Okay, so then to continue this with, I can work with him, if I'm understanding correctly, to rebuild it so that it has the 28-inch top here, and then the differential is 36, and the commission is accepting that, or he can propose a different design, but for that, he would have to come back to the commission. Is that correct?
Right.
That's correct. Since this has
Okay.
already been approved and passed
Okay,
by the commission, then that design is acceptable. If he wants to change the top portion, whatever's between 28 and 36, that would have to come back
okay,
before the commission for approval.
Yeah.
all right.
So if I'm hearing right, if I take it down to 28 inches, that's something that the staff could approve and allow to happen.
She can,
Yes.
and if you
Yeah.
wanted, if you want the extra height, then she can,
So essentially, what they said
so you don't have
was,
to come back here.
sorry, I have to go back a ways here. I never know what order to put these in, because it never fails, whatever I do doesn't work. So essentially, the new railing, the main portion would look like this, and then you would add that upper crossbar with supports, I don't know what was on the image, but it was every 3 or every 4th one, to give it that height that you want to meet the 36, and that would bring it up to code. But it would still keep the exact proportion of a historic railing down below. And staff said that I was authorized to work with you on that one. If you would like a different design, that's something we would have to come back in front of the commission for.
Understood. I have to go back and talk a little bit with my boss.
Okay.
Good
All right.
man. Okay.
And I'm assuming that same railing could be done on the porch on the second floor.
That was our plan. It's not a usable porch, so we weren't going to do a 36-inch railing up there.
Just keep
because-
that at 28.
Keep it at
Yeah,
28.
because the whole idea was to make the house look like it should for the neighborhood. And that's why I did what I did, trying to make it safe and look appropriate for the neighborhood.
Sure.
Okay, what else do we have on this one?
Okay.
Is there anything else on this one?
No, that is it for this one. All right, I will follow
Thank
up
you.
with you tomorrow.
Okay.
All right.
And did I hear correctly that we have to wait a week before we can start work? Because we've been waiting about a month now.
No, I will,
We'll
I'll
on
work,
that.
yeah,
Okay.
I'll follow up with you tomorrow.
Did you want to keep that one?
I would love it, if you don't mind. I have a whole
You
collection.
take it.
No, that would be,
Something else for you.
oh, awesome, thank you. I'm gonna get tetanus one of these days from the things I keep hanging around, but I do keep interesting parts. Now, I don't know, is Mr. McCutcheon here? So this is one where he was unable to attend this evening. Historically, the commission has not allowed things on the agenda if the property owner or their representative is not here. If you feel this one is simple enough that you have absolutely no questions and would approve as proposed, then you're more, I think, Ruth, you're legal. Is that something they could go ahead and accept, or?
I want to do that.
Okay.
If they have any questions, we table it till the next month.
Okay.
It's
So
up to you.
I will let
And
y'all
so
decide.
we
what
probably
you-
better off to table it. All right.
It's up to you. I mean, if you think you'll have any questions at all. let's
When you
table
looked at it, did you have any,
No, as long as the landscape's there. 'Cause
I mean,
otherwise
based
you-
on the latest plan, I didn't have any, did you guys look at the latest plan with the landscape change? To me, it's no different than our first, one that came through, and I feel like,
Yeah.
I feel comfortable.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and do it.
I think we can go ahead and do it. I can make
Okay,
a motion that the greenhouse is accepted with the screening and landscaping as shown.
okay. Do you have a second?
Second.
All in
All in
favor?
Aye.
All right, I will let them know that it's been approved. Next up is not a COA, it is a courtesy review for new construction. So typically with large additions and new constructions, we have the builder and the property owner meet with the commission just for level setting on expectations so that they're not burning a lot of design hours without understanding the standards for the district. This is for a vacant lot that's on Jackson Street. We don't have many vacant lots in the district. It's on the corner of Jackson and Fourth. There is no address yet because there's no house there, so that's why I don't have an address on the paperwork. So this is the lot as standing on the sidewalks. Oops, and I have Grant Street on there, my apologies. And they did have initial drawings prepared for what they were sort of proposing. And this is a 1.5-story craftsman style building. And that is the side elevation. So I'm going to come back to this and I'll read. So this is the courtesy review that they're requesting. Decatur's Design Review Standards for new construction, 19. And I put a copy of the full guidelines in your packet because it's quite lengthy. For height, it is asking that the height of the building meet those adjacent and neighboring to it. And you can see all the buildings down the street are full 2-story, and across the street we just have sort of one catty corner. So it does not appear to meet that standard. For proportions, for most of the house, it does not appear to meet those standards because the houses adjacent and neighboring are 2-story and L-shaped, cross gable or rectangular with side gable or even hipped front. So it's different. For rhythm, and that would include fenestration and porch columns, the large multi-light picture windows are not historically found within the district, and there are none on adjacent houses. That's like a ranch style design detail. The front door is a contemporary 6-panel colonial revival. Setbacks, we don't have that data yet, so they would need a full site plan showing setbacks to keep within and a landscape plan for full submittal. For design, design does not appear to be consistent with adjacent neighboring houses. Craftsman houses are simply not found near this empty lot. The neighboring designs are late 19th and early 20th, but more sort of the Victorian era. The solid paneled front door, underscaled transom are not found within the district. The front doors in the district, typically the upper 40% or so is glazed. So if you go down the street, you will see doors where the upper portion has large glazing. Materials, they did include a material list below. The commission has authorized the use of hardy plank or similar materials in prior new builds as long as it is smoothed, non-textured materials are used. Clear direction on overlap and siding reveals should be given to the designer so they can submit appropriate documentation for a full COA. Staff does not have detailed information on the windows or the proposed porch supports. The commission has been requiring double hung windows before, and if any sort of muntin pattern is requested, it's simulated divided lights where it shows you actually have the overlay on the outside that you're looking at, not between the glass. For the proposed stone at the base of these piers, and these are craftsman styled piers, but there is no stone that is used for detailing within the district. It's brick on any of the adjacent houses. For the porch, the size and the roof appear to meet the standards. The details in terms of the tapered wood piers that are craftsman are not necessarily for this section of the neighborhood. So I can kind of go back through. So you see this is a turn of the century Victorian. This is also a Victorian, another Victorian. This one has double doors. We don't have very many of those in the district. That's very rare. This is sort of catty corner across the street. This is a free classic design, which is another form of Victorian. Those are the neighboring houses. And I believe, there we go. That is the builder, that is the property owner. And so if you have questions, we're gonna have them come to the front. You can sort of walk them through what you would like to see for the next time they come in with a full packet.
Hi, I'm Keith and this is Peyton.
And you're the designer? You're the owner or the designer?
I'm the owner of the property and he's the builder.
Okay.
And I will say Peyton is very passionate about this neighborhood. He very much, Keith, he very much is concerned because he will call me about things on the street that we have no control over, but I know they concern all of you in terms of parking and trucks and things that he would love to see. So I have told him those are conversations for the police department and council, but we very appreciative and see many of the same challenges that you have highlighted. So.
Okay. Well, I guess my concern is, we're talking about the height of what the drawing that we've got right now. That I know it's on a corner or whatever, but it's not, it's gonna be kind of different. And what we're trying to do is get it to fit in with the styles around it. That's my main concern on the front of it. And with the stylistic details that Carolyn's pointed out that are different from what's around it, and the part of the neighborhood, that's my concern with it.
Okay.
Y'all have any other comments?
For me, with new construction, it's important to look at the adjacent houses beside it. If you look on I think it's the south side of Jackson, every house on that whole street is two-story. And I don't think I saw a single dormer when I drove down that side. And your current design has a huge dormer on one side and a small dormer on the other. So it kind of doesn't fit the pattern on that side of the street. There are some single story. I didn't see a story and a half, I don't think, on the north side of Jackson, but they're not technically adjacent. So I really want to look at the rhythm of that south side. So number one, a two-story is going to be more appropriate to go there than a story and a half.
Okay.
So that's kind of item number one. I do agree with the stone. We don't want that. If we could look at some other materials, I mean, you don't have to use wood per se, but you could do synthetic materials that look like wood, like hardy or something else we use. And also looking down that street, I think just about every house, it was a double hung window. Most of them were 1/1. There were some that were 3/1. But the large picture windows definitely don't fit the style.
So if we traded that for a twin window instead of this,
A twin double hung is more appropriate than
Okay.
the picture window.
That and the columns. Can you go back to the drawing? Yeah. The tapered columns.
The craftsman style?
Yeah, the whole Craftsman style
Yeah,
doesn't fit
'cause there's-
with what's on that side
What's
of
in
the street.
there, right?
'Cause I don't think there is one right now.
And the stone thing, stone bit.
There may be one halfway down Jackson on the,
No, I
North
stayed,
side.
I stayed to adjacent since
Yeah.
that was the standards, what they were saying.
would a brick base be accepted? Okay.
Yeah, better than stone, I think.
a brick base.
Oh,
It
yeah,
is definitely
okay.
more appropriate. So if you kind of look at those, I guess they have cross gables, the styles of the house, so it's not instead of a roof and a dormer, it's a full two-story style. So if you could incorporate that into the design.
That's about all I've got. Anybody else have anything?
Pretty well covered.
I think maybe resubmit, if you could
Okay.
look, check it out. I mean, not copy, but just so it fits in. We're gonna know it's new. And that's good, and it's good that we're filling in the vacant lots, so.
I think looking at the setbacks, like she was saying, some type of site plan, it kind of shows us where this house sits in comparison to the one beside it. Because you don't want it to be 10, 20 feet in front of the other one. So you kind of keeping that front porches kind of lined up down the street.
Okay.
And landscaping
And
plan too?
landscape.
Okay. I can follow up in an email and list all this out so that y'all will have it and you can share it with Colleen.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right, I'll do that tomorrow.
What about access to the site?
Access
Like
to the site?
driveways, access from the alley,
Ah.
how all that?
Yeah, that'll be
There
on,
is
that'll be on a
access.
site plan, and I can give you, information on what they historically have addressed with driveways and what's required. I think there is something on that site now, if I remember correctly.
Also, I guess,
Yeah, there's a portion of a driveway or sidewalk there. I'll have to-
Sidewalk, yeah, that's
Sidewalk,
it.
okay.
I think the plan as it's drawn, shows being access from the alley.
alley.
Okay. They love that. All right.
We did have one additional question about, how we need to go about getting a fence approved. Is that something we need to include with the house plan?
Front fence, back fence, what are you thinking in terms of where it's
A
located?
picket fence, a wooden picket fence around whatever we can,
So if it's in the front yard and it goes along the side of the house, give or take the halfway point, it's gonna depend a little bit on the design of the house. I can approve that later, or you can submit it with your plan. 3 foot high is the max for that. If you wanna do a privacy fence in the rear, where that starts on that side elevation is gonna depend a little bit on the plan you submit, and up to 6 foot is the max for your standard sort of like dog-eared or 5-board fence on the rear.
Okay.
And I can send you, if you want to look at images of what's been approved or what's within the district, I'm more than happy to send you a list of addresses or images.
that'd be great, thank you.
So, okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
I don't,
Y'all have any other questions?
I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so next up, we have design review update from Thomason and Associates.
Hello.
We're loading this up here.
Yep.
Is there a way I can advance it from here, or?
John, does he have an advancer where he can click it from the podium? Is there an advancer at the podium where he can advance to the next slide? No. Okay. Bill, if you tell me when, I
Okay.
will just do it. Just say next, and I will
Next,
click to
okay.
the next for you.
Great. Again, Phil Thomason, Thomason Associates, and we've been working for the last several months on preparing and updating the design guidelines. And it looks like you all have a copy of the latest iteration of the draft. And just want to walk through that with you and sort of the next steps where we go from here. Next. So again, purpose of the project to update the existing design guidelines that you have that were prepared in 2001. And again, based on some earlier design guidelines I worked on back in the early 90s. But again, just to make them more user-friendly, more graphics, more explanation in some areas, update the information on best practices, explore kind of criteria for alternative materials, because that's something that we've been dealing with a lot over the last 10 to 15 years, and then update some information on tax incentives. So where we are now, we have revised and submitted the draft of the design guidelines for review, and look forward to your review and comments over the next few weeks. We have some additional photographs and illustrations to be incorporated over the next month or so. The new illustrations are primarily going to be in the infill, the new construction chapter towards the end. So the drawings that you see there will be replaced from some new drawings by my graphic artist. I'll be coming back on August 10th, and I think between now and then, just think about what other questions you might have, any particular aspects of the design guidelines that you would like for me to go into more depth or detail, and talk with Caroline about that, so I can maybe not have to repeat the same information to you again, but maybe focus on some elements that you would like for me to get more in depth on. So you will find in the draft that there are some maps that were created for the 2 historic districts. Those were created by your GIS folks here, and appreciate their putting these maps together. So you have Old Decatur and Albany, and I think those are going to be a little bit easier to read and in your guidelines. We have a short section on history and include a few illustrations. These are some postcards that were provided to us by the Morgan County Archives, and just kind of put that in for context and what these historic districts, how they were evolving over time with the architectural styles, and as we go into the early 20th century. So we thought those would be nice additions into the short historical section that we have. Yeah, you can see again from a couple in Albany and then in Old Decatur. Okay. So again, just some streetscapes as we go through the guidelines, and what we did a lot of analysis and looking at common details, common elements, and the Craftsman houses here in the 300 block of Canal Street, and more of the Victorian era houses in the 400 block of Sherman Street. And we also detail each primary architectural style that you have in the 2 districts. And you will see with the photographs that we include, we also included little bubbles with the numbers to outline and highlight the details. So each of the architectural styles has that to assist property owners in identifying the characteristics and the details of the particular style. So Greek Revival in Old Decatur, Italianate on Johnston Street in Albany. You have any number of wonderful Queen Anne style houses. This one on Jackson Street with the corner tower. Free Classic, again, Queen Anne style kind of massing, but with usually Colonial Revival, neoclassical columns and porch elements. Second Empire, the one example that you have in Old Decatur, but again, characterized by its mansard roof and has a lovely full width porch on the main facade.
That's Lynn's house. That's why she's laughing, because that's her house.
You have great taste. You have any number of what we call foot Victorian houses, pyramid square houses, gabled L houses like you see here with the front-facing gable. Usually these have a full width porch or wraparound porch. Okay.
There we go.
Colonial Revival style, as we sort of moved away from the very ornate, asymmetrical Victorian styles and getting more into the Colonial Revival era in the 1890s, early 1900s. And so this is a really good example that harkens back to the colonial architecture of the 1700s and 1800s in America. A variation of the Colonial Revival style, the Dutch Colonial with the gambrel roof. You have several examples of these in the Albany Historic District. American Foursquare, and these are designs that are coming out of the influence of colonial revival and prairie styles of the early 1900s, but basically rectangular or square in plan. Usually they have a full-width porch on the main facade, hip dormers at the roof line, a number of those in both historic districts. Neoclassical revival, also associated with the colonial movement of the early 20th century, and these are characterized by the two-story porticos on the main facade. These can be with Doric, Ionic, sometimes Corinthian columns, but mostly you have Ionic, I believe. And your craftsman houses, you've got many craftsman houses that are just really well built, well designed, and very popular in the 19-teens and 1920s in both historic districts. Full width porch here, wide eaves, large knee brace brackets at the roof line. You're one good example of the Spanish colonial revival style here on Line Street. Also, you find these in a number of cities throughout the southeast and west. Not as popular as other styles, particularly Tudor revival next, which you find in a lot of streets in your historic districts. And Tudor revival is picking up on sort of the medieval elements that we had carried over from England, and its characteristics of arched openings, arched windows, prominent chimneys on the primary facade. And your one really classic sort of art moderne. Whose is this? All right, good for you. All right. Yeah, this is really one of the more notable ones that I've ever inventoried or looked at. But anyway, just continues to have the structural glass blocks and the stucco exterior, and just an excellent example. Okay. And especially in Albany, on the streets in the 800 to 1,000 blocks, you've got a number of what we call minimal traditional style houses from the 20s, 30s, and 40s that are essentially hearkening back to the colonial revival style of the Tudor revival style, but are very sort of stripped down versions of these types of styles. You see a number of these constructed with asbestos shingles, which became a pretty popular building material in the 1930s and 1940s. And then finally, you've got a number of ranch-style houses. Not many of them, because most lots were developed by the time the ranch houses came in the 1950s and 1960s. But several of these also in the two historic districts. And in addition to the dwellings, you also have just a couple of commercial buildings, but primarily these are all residential districts in character. But this building on Oak Street retains its original storefront, and that's addressed as well. And your churches, those also fall under your purview in terms of design review. So the approach that we have, next. Oh, sorry, don't want to forget Delano Park and the buildings there that you also do review for, and these really nice WPA era buildings that were constructed in the 1930s. So the fundamentals that we work with in every community are to preserve original historic fabric, reuse and recycle existing materials, repair in kind with like materials or the closest sustainable materials. If repair is not possible, replace in kind with like materials or the closest sustainable materials. And for new construction and additions, having them make a minimal impact, the additions make a minimal impact to historic buildings, and use sustainable materials as much as possible. So one of the things as we looked at the guidelines for Decatur, one thing was clarifying the level of review for side and rear elevations, just taking a look at that, reevaluating alternative materials, review and clarify appropriate windows and doors. There's, again, you talk about the double hung windows that are just, you know, in the great majority of your houses in the historic districts. Review the infill guidelines for primary dwellings and secondary buildings like garages. Clarify the review of landscaping through fences, retaining walls, and plantings, and review appropriateness of parking locations. Those are some of the things that stood out for us as we went through the design guideline elements. Next. So again, just looking at public versus private space, you know, rear elevations, having more leeway, more flexibility in terms of additions there, porch designs there, just something to consider that are not in the visual aspects of the public right-of-way. Certainly for masonry, and you know, I think most commissions over the years, design review boards, recognize that abrasive cleaning of brick is very detrimental. So that's very clear in your guidelines, and we just reiterate that. But masonry walls should not be sandblasted. You can see the damage that's happened in this particular property. Next. And where the brick simply erodes because the mortar is harder, the repointing was done inappropriately, and the mortar joints are there, but your brick is deteriorating. And this leads again to spalling and cracking, and in this particular case, you can see the inappropriate mortar, and that's flush with the brick itself. It's not raked or recessed. Other kind of materials that you've got in terms of, you know, rock, stucco, and then the rusticated concrete block like you see here on the right. You know, you have a lovely cobblestone porch, the one on Sherman Street. But these are just materials just always to preserve and maintain and repair as necessary with consistent materials. Preserve and maintain original wood siding, and we had that sort of discussion one of your reviews here earlier this afternoon. But again, just trying to keep as much of the original siding as possible, and where it can't be repaired, match it as closely as you can. Same thing with all the other kind of design elements of wood, like your wood shingles. You have many examples of fish scale shingles, hexagonal butt shingles in your gable fields, upper facades in the two historic districts. Another example here of buried wood shingles with this house on Sherman Street. And again, just staying away from adding vinyl siding, which is not appropriate on your historic buildings, and not appropriate for a variety of reasons. The appearance is never similar to wood, but also this kind of addition encapsulates the building. Your wood siding can't breathe, and you have moisture problems oftentimes that result. So keeping that, that approach with keeping vinyl siding to a minimum is, again, recommended. Cementitious siding may be appropriate in some circumstances. This is the smooth board that cementitious siding comes in, but stay away from the grained designs. The grained designs typically do not resemble wood adequately, are not appropriate. And you've got a few, you know, houses with asbestos shingles, and a number of the minimal traditional and ranch style houses, this is the original siding, and again, it's fine as long as it's encapsulated, just keep it. But other houses like the one that you have on 119 Lafayette Street, if anyone ever, you know, future owner ever wants to take that off and restore the siding underneath, we do find with asbestos shingles, lots of times The wood siding underneath is in relatively good shape. Asbestos seems to be a fairly breathable material over time. So if anyone ever wants to restore the siding underneath, that's certainly appropriate, and generally it's pretty successful. I mean, you have to follow the guidelines, the EPA guidelines, with how you take the siding asbestos shingles off and bag it and take it to the appropriate landfill. But that's certainly an approach that we could, encourage. Preserve and maintain original porch details. Keep the turn columns, the balusters, valances. These you find again, Queen Anne style. Free classic, like you see here with this, the Tuscan columns and the milled balusters. There are reproduction Victorian turn posts that are available. Again, we see that there are a number of alternative sort of materials out there, but also recommend first looking at wood columns. The Old House Journal has lots of different advertisements, for examples. Salvage places oftentimes have these kind of original mill posts, or where you can go to a milling company and get these reproduced. And just some examples of reproduction wood. Porch supports. These would be appropriate for free classic kind of houses, American four squares. But the designs that are like Tuscan columns or similar to Doric columns. So as you have done in the past, you've approved fiberglass columns, and these, again, in some situations may be appropriate. They seem to have the right kind of dimensions and appearance from the street. So fiberglass, again, just depends on the property and depends on how well the columns match those of a traditional Tuscan column of wood. Porch materials, the recycled plastic materials, Trex is one of the common products. We've seen a number of commissions approve these kind of floor materials over time. And we're just not sure really what the longevity of these materials are going to be. They may be an appropriate addition on a rear porch, but we're just sort of considering, really are they appropriate for front porches? So that's one of the questions to sort of think through as we get our design guidelines into final form. And just another example of the kind of composites that you have in these materials that people have been adding on porch floors. You have a remarkably few number of screen porches on the primary facades. And your design guidelines are written in a way to discourage enclosures of front porches with screen panels. If it's a small addition, if it's a small portion of the porch like you have here on Gordon Street, something like that may be appropriate. But the screening in of like a full width or large partial width porch, I think that's, again, just keep that to a minimum or discourage that. Preserve and maintain original chimneys. Lots of times your chimneys have decorative features, whether they're on an exterior wall like you have here on Canal Street, or the corbel brickwork that you have at the roof line with the house on Lafayette Street. But certainly preserve and maintain those. And I've seen any number of times where the chimney is cut off right at the roof eave, and you don't want that. That's not appropriate to shorten the chimney in that fashion. Preserve and maintain original door and entrance details. Again, just keep your original single light glass and wood doors. You have wonderful doors really throughout both historic districts with side lights and transoms and other sort of decorative detailing. Examples here again on Grant Street and Canal Street of original entrances with the door design, sidewalks, transoms. Storm doors are appropriate as long as they're the full view design like you see here, so you can view the historic door behind the storm door. What's not appropriate are typically the stock doors that you get from Lowe's, Home Depot, those sorts of places. They're really just, you know, we've seen some designs in those, you know, the large companies sometimes are appropriate with, you know, like you can get mill turnposts at some of these locations, but these kind of stock doors typically are not appropriate. And again, there's lots of different options that you have for either getting doors, if your original door is gone, getting a door that's salvaged from other historic properties, or you know, just finding a company that will make you an appropriate design for that particular house. Preserve and maintain original windows, like you see here, 1/1 sash on Line Street, and the 4/1 vertical sash, as we call them, that you typically find with craftsman-style houses from the 1910s and 20s here on Canal Street. I spoke about this before at our first meeting, but again, so much of energy is lost through, you know, if there's a concern about losing energy out your windows, it's typically a small amount when you look at the overall loss of energy out the rest of the house. You know, you look at your floors, walls, and ceilings, plumbing penetrations, that sort of thing. So typically, you're just not losing that much energy out your window. And what we find is, through lots of studies that have been done over the last 20 years, that you know, preserving and maintaining your old growth wood window and then putting a storm window over it gives you about as much thermal efficiency as, you know, the high-end vinyl sash windows, double pane sash windows. So this is, the numbers on this are probably a little old, but this is an illustration just showing again what the payback's going to be, and you're going to have your house, you know, for like 40 years to get enough return on your investment of replacing all of your old growth wood windows and adding, you know, vinyl sash or aluminum sash back. Next. So again, historic wood windows with the added storm and weather stripping equals the U value of most replacement windows. You get much better payback through weatherizing your historic wood windows, and take 30 to 40 plus years to recoup the cost of replacement windows. And usually we find also the life expectancy of vinyl sash windows, maybe 15, 20 years, so you know, they're not going to last 30 to 40 years anyway. And again, any replacement window should have true divided lights, like you see here, whether you go back in with a wood window or aluminum clad, something like that. So, and again, these are just a couple of examples of recent window studies that, again, show the efficiency of preserving and maintaining your old growth wood windows, rebuilding those, putting a storm window on as opposed to replacement. And just an example of an appropriate storm window where it's either full view or, in this case, where the structural framework matches the meeting rail of the wood sash window behind it. Appropriate window shutters, and you know, any house built probably on into the early 1900s, you know, again, that had shutters and they're missing and you want to go back, that's appropriate. But again, they have to be sized correctly so that if they're closed, they would close over the window and they have the right kind of hardware and that sort of thing. But we also find that, you know, you've got these decorative window shutters for minimal traditional houses and the ranch style houses that you've got. And you've got any number of these designs, especially in the Albany Historic District. And you know, these were designed just to be non-functional, you know, and so these would be appropriate if they're missing and somebody wants to put those back, or they want to replace something that's deteriorated with a matching shutter like that. Canvas awnings, you really don't have too many houses in either historic district that have window awnings or porch awnings. And they're, you know, pretty efficient at, you may start seeing more applications for these in the future, just because they really do help with the heat in the summertime, solar gain. But this is an example of an appropriate design on Gordon Street, and then just a typical striped awning that you have here. And I put awnings all through the front of my house maybe about 7 years ago, and I've really noticed a difference in terms of my cooling bills in the summertime. Preserve and maintain original roof materials. You have a number of houses that still have the original slate, and you want to preserve and maintain those materials as long as possible and just repair those rather than wholesale replacement if you can do that. Other kind of roof materials you've got the pressed metal shingles that you see here on the left. Those would be original on Johnston Street, and then clay tile on the house on Jackson Street. You really don't have too many houses that, you know, have like, you know, metal roofs, the standing seam metal roof, crimped roofs. Unfortunately, we do see these kind of inappropriate metal roofs being requested in historic districts where the crimping and spacing simply is not in keeping with a traditional standing seam metal roof design. So if you start getting more requests for metal roofs to replace existing fiberglass or asphalt shingle roofs, just make sure that you follow, you know, what the traditional sort of, again, spacing, crimping designs, like the next slide, like you see here. Those are, you know, matching, those are new roof materials, but they, again, are appropriate in terms of matching traditional designs. Appropriate gutters and downspouts. These are the half-round, round downspouts, and Carolyn and I have had fun kind of talking over which ones work the best. These type, or the K, you know, the OG kind of K gutters and downspouts. So we see both that the K kind of design has more capacity, but the round downspouts have better capacity than the square rectangular downspouts. So basically, you know, whichever your applicant might want on the house, because they both seem to be pretty efficient. So things you learn as you go through these processes. So preserve and maintain, you know, your original light fixtures, and most of these are going to be from the early 20th century on your Craftsman, Tudor Revival style houses, when these houses, you know, again, were built with electricity as opposed to those with perhaps gas lighting in the 19th century. Preserve and maintain your original cast iron and wrought iron fences. You see here on Sherman Street and Ferry Street, and these again are very significant to the streetscapes and the context of your historic districts. Examples of appropriate picket fences, you know, the 3-foot height in the front, and we have a number of examples that we include in the guidelines in terms of, you know, the types of pickets and where they should be, and again, the structural support on the backside, that sort of thing. And this is an example here with the appropriate privacy fence placement. We have this illustration in your guidelines where you don't want the privacy fence way out next to your front porch or with the same plane as the front of the house, and to pull it back at least to halfway of the depth of the house, and then preferably even all the way back to the rear of the house. So trying to clarify that as much as we can for your privacy fences, and this shows, you know, appropriate placement and height of your fences here. at the rear of these two houses. And again, just the right kind of location and height. Not appropriate are the non-traditional sort of wall materials that we see out, on sidewalk levels of, the split face block or oversized kind of brick. These are just not traditional kind of materials that you ever had really in the historic district. So, on the rear elevation or something like that, they may be fine, but just out by the street, not appropriate. You've got great ribbon driveways, these driveways where, they're the concrete, or, we also call them just the tracks, the ribbon tracks for your driveways from the early 20th century when people started buying automobiles. But you have a number of these designs. What's not appropriate is paving the front yards. What you have here, that's not a traditional approach. And so we certainly discourage that. We also include some illustrations and designs of appropriate ADA compliance. You don't have that many dwellings that are used for offices. You have that one street in Albany, for example, that, again, any sort of commercial or office, you do have to have an ADA compliant ramp. And so we include some illustrations of what would be appropriate and the guidelines like landscaping, matching the porch railing as much as possible, side elevations or rear elevations as opposed to a front elevation. So what you're looking at here is the rear of this house, and the photograph on the right is from the street, and as you look back, you're only seeing a small portion of the ramp and landscape, so this is appropriately placed on this office property. Preserve and maintain original garages and outbuildings. You have a number of these that are throughout the two historic districts, and certainly just preserve and maintain these types of buildings. I know you can't really fit a car in these, some of the small ones anymore, but certainly keep them as long as you can, use them for storage or whatever. We also discuss energy conservation, and these are a couple of publications that we refer to that came out a number of years ago about sustainability guidelines for historic districts and how to retrofit historic buildings to be as energy efficient as they can be. And within that, we look at solar panels and the addition of solar panels on historic houses. In some cases, I've seen where these panels are located on a rear yard and just are freestanding. Also, you see them on rear roof lines. You have both solar panels and solar shingles, and you may start seeing more, again, applications for these kind of materials. And, we're just still waiting to see if these solar shingles, like you see here on the right, get better in terms of their appearance, and maybe at some point in the future that they will really look like a traditional asphalt or fiberglass shingle roof, but it's all, with the appearance, of a traditional kind of roof like that, but they're solar shingles and, can really assist in your energy conservation. Obviously, yes, do not locate them on primary elevations like you see here. These are inappropriate locations for solar panels. Side elevations that are not readily visible or rear, certainly more appropriate. We also discuss the size and scale of additions. This is an addition here at the back of this house. You can see sort of peeking out on the right-hand side, but just in the right kind of scale and not readily visible from the street. Also depends some on your side yard setbacks and how close you are to your neighboring property. This is from the front, and the next slide shows the addition. You can see how large it is, but it's not readily visible from the street. And the other thing that in a lot of communities, they require a certain you're setting in the side elevation, at least a foot or more, to show where the original house ends and then where the addition begins. So that's an example here, as you can see the original house and then the setback, side setback to the addition. And these are just some of the illustrations that are in the guidelines that we prepared for you, just showing the right location and size and scale. We also have guidelines for appropriate new construction, and just include some examples here of inappropriate infill construction where there's no porch on the primary elevation like you see here. The fenestration is not correct, mixture of materials that are not correct. Next. Same thing where the massing, the scale, lack of porch, lack of proper fenestration. Yeah, this is not appropriate for either of your historic districts. And another example here of, putting in like a ranch kind of style house where the rest of the houses are more Victorian in appearance and 2 stories. So again, we are working on a series of drawings that will be of assistance, I think, in terms of your infill design. But this is an appropriate Craftsman replica, and however you want to approach just approving new construction that is more replica in design, that's certainly within your review. There's a Craftsman replica here at the top example, and then Folk Victorian, that's a new house here at the bottom, but it's basically designed just to mimic the overall massing, scale, the right kind of fenestration, and the correct porch placement and size of the columns. These are some examples of new construction that are more Queen Anne and American Foursquare, what I call kind of replica light. They are similar in terms of the historic buildings up and down the street with the gable and hipped roofs, porches on the primary facade, right kind of fenestration, but tweaked in ways that clearly show that they're more of a contemporary design rather than historic design. And this is an appropriate Craftsman replica that has been approved here in the Old Decatur Historic District, and some appropriate infill garages. Fortunately, again, you don't have nearly as many vacant lots in your historic districts as other communities that I've worked in. So hopefully infill design will not be a major part of your design review in future years. We have guidelines in there again for relocation and demolition, just in case a property needs to be relocated from one lot to another, and just the appropriateness of that, how that happens. And then we also go through the discussion of when demolition might be, warranted, or what the property owner would have to prove to you to get a COA for any kind of demolition permit. So that's included in the guidelines as well. So to summarize, again, you've got the draft, revised draft now, and look forward to your review and comments. And it would be helpful for us to have your comments kind of summarized to Carolyn, so she can kind of put that all into one email to me, and I can address those remarks and move closer to a final product.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an editor working on this, or someone who's actually looking at the language that's in here?
That would be me.
Okay,
What am I missing?
You missed a lot.
Okay.
I mean, I've got several pages here where we have a little block here, and it starts, and then there's nothing left. I mean, you didn't get the whole thing.
Oh,
There's
okay.
several, I'm a grammarian, there's several
Okay.
things, comma splices, I'm big into that, so I'm not gonna fault you on that. But where we have places that, for instance, Gordon Street is not Gordon Street, it's Gordon Drive, southeast. I mean, we've got
Okay.
some corrections there.
Okay,
But I just,
okay, thank you.
I would request that you read it through for continuity, spelling completion of the information. I love the pictures, especially of Decatur. I think you've done a relatively good job on that, working, and of course, I want you to work with Caroline on getting what our responsibilities are, what we can approve, not approve, that sort of thing. She's got it down to what we can do. And I think that's where that needs to be. But when I read through it, and I haven't gone over word for word, but it's just,
Need some work.
if I submitted this brief to someone else, I would be committing malpractice.
Okay,
This is my comment.
okay.
Anything else? I've had my
Well, I
rant.
mean, I kind of agree with you. I mean, I've gone through and started marking stuff up all over the place. And there are some things I'm gonna work with Caroline with, or maybe some verbiage we wanna add in there to
Sure.
clarify some things just based on some of the issues we've dealt with in our review process that we may wanna add, to some of these categories to hopefully eliminate some of the issues we've had in the past. In the future, we don't have them.
Yeah, to be more clear
Yeah.
on what,
Because we have a few things that tend to be
Right.
recurring
Mhm.
issues in our district that we'd like to really,
I mean,
if we could clarify it in this, it would
our current
really
ones
be
don't really
helpful.
address it, so. that's-
Yeah, and again, that's what this process is for, because, communities I work in, some ARBs are simply much stricter in some areas than others, in terms of leniency and how they interpret the Secretary of the Interior standards and what is most appropriate or specific to their historic district, so.
Okay. Bill, any
Thank you for your
comments?
presentation.
Sure, thank you.
Updates on compliance, 411 Walnut, that is due to be finished by August 31st. 504 Walnut, settlement docket was June 20th. He opted to move forward. That will go to municipal court. The date has not been set yet. Jacob?
What was that? I was looking for the agenda.
Oh,
I
that's
got
okay.
all my papers shuffled around
Ask if anyone has questions.
here. Do we have any questions from the public? Comments? Okay,
All right,
well, then, I call this meeting adjourned. Well,
we
actually,
need a motion.
I do one thing, I need a motion to adjourn.
I'm so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Now it's closed.
All in favor, stand up.